Welcome to Tombstone. Yeah. So what's so great about Tombstone is you get to walk where they walked back in the day. What you see is pretty much what you get.
Welcome to Tombstone, Arizona, the town too tough to die, one of America's most famous Old West towns. And today, we're here to check it out. The town was founded in 1877 after silver was found nearby, and almost overnight, the town boomed, full of gamblers, miners, cowboys, you name it. This was the place to be out here in Arizona. So come join me today as we walk through Tombstone and check out some of the sites that made this town legendary. Tombstone's one of those places where if you're a fan of the Wild West, you have to absolutely know about this place. And you know, I don't think I could do justice telling some of the stories here. That's why I asked some of the local experts, some of the tour guides here, if they could share some of their knowledge.
Welcome to Tombstone. Yeah. So what's so great about Tombstone is you get to walk where they walked back in the day. What you see is pretty much what you get. Pretty much everything that you see here was back there in the day. Now it may have been rebuilt because it is a historic landmark. A lot of the buildings are going to get rebuilt and made and put back the exact same way that they saw it back then. Especially they got a building right here. This was built in 1882 by Todd Allen. And that's exactly what this is on Allen Street. This street was named after him because he's done a lot of design work and had a lot of places built here in Tombstone. So, of course, that infamous gunfight. Of course, the Hollywood said it was at the OK Corral, but we all know it was on Fremont Street. Right now, the boys are out there. They're advertising for that famous gunfight, that historical fight that happened on Fremont Street. Right now, they partake that in there. They have their own little theater back there. You can join it at any time. Down here, you've got a lot of famous activities. We talk about what that infamous walk down that the Earps did. If you look down here, the original Oriental Saloon is there. That was now the Earps didn't own that. A lot of people think they owned it, but no, they just ran faro games out of that particular building. They walked down here on October 26th, which happens to be 144 years ago to this day. Around this time, as a matter of fact, between 2 and 3 o'clock. They pick up Doc Holliday this was a saloon at the time, and they walk down to Fremont Street. They make a left, they head down there. Johnny Behan meets them and says, "Hey, I disarmed those cowboys." Well, of course, 3 of them had guns, and the rest is history. That gunfight spilled out into Fremont Street, where, of course, 3 were dead, 3 were injured, and 3 walked away without a scratch on them. So that's part of the great history here. You can actually walk where they had walked.
On Allen Street here in Tombstone, Arizona. This is the OK Corral, the most famous gunfight site of the Wild West. This is exactly where it happened. This is the OK Corral. It was the vacant lot right behind the OK Corral here where the gunfight happened in 1881, and this is the anniversary of the gunfight. That's right, it happened 144 years ago right here at the OK Corral, October 26, 1881. So fortuitous day to be here.
All right, so here's the story as I heard it, right? Why is Tombstone here? Well, the main reason is silver. Now, there was a man named Ed Shefflin. Okay, he was mainly a prospector, but also that was his main hobby that he loved to do. But he also worked for the Army down here just south of us, which was at that time called Camp Huachuca. Now it is Fort Huachuca, which is one of the largest Army bases here in Arizona and active still. So on his time off, he would actually come out and he would just be looking for pretty rocks, as we say it here. Okay. Now, eventually, he did. The people that were with his Army buddies, they were like, "Now, the only thing you're going to find out here, the only stone you're going to find, is your tombstone." So with that saying, he finally found a big chunk of silver. Now, it was upper 90s as far as purity. And when he grabbed it, he had to take it up past Tucson, back up there to have it get the quality check. At the time, I think it was worth $15,000, which is huge money today. So with that investment, he opened up his very first mine, which happens to be about 2.6 miles right down Allen Street here. You can almost see Shefflin's monument, but it's kind of obscure right now. But that was where the first mine was. Now the first mine, it was called the Tombstone Mine. And he named it after, because they said the only thing you're going to find is your tombstone. From that, he actually, there's 26 mines here in Tombstone, and he was part of 19 of them is what were owned by him. There's still one over here you can tour, which is the Good Enough Mine. You can actually tour that down here on 5th and Tough Nut.
So here at the Tough Nut 9, we'll take you 100 feet underground to the mine that started everything here in Tombstone. It is the original mine that started everything in 1877 by Ed Shefflin. The mine itself is absolutely beautiful down there. It stays a cool 68 to 70 degrees right now. Gems and silver still line the walls everywhere you look. We have 520 miles of mine under our town, but obviously we won't take you that far. We do take you 2 city blocks underground, and for a 45-minute guided tour of the history of Tombstone. It is the real history, not the Hollywood history. So if you're here in Tombstone, it's definitely something you want to check out.
Another one of the tour guides was telling me that there's a lot of silver still here that was left over. Is there a reason for that, or?
Because they couldn't take it all back then. Obviously, they were mining with older equipment, picks and hammers, and dynamite that was equivalent to a firecracker nowadays, basically. So they couldn't take it all out. And not by modern standards, we dig a big trench nowadays and dig it all up. They couldn't do that back then. They had to do tunneling. So what was left in there, they couldn't just keep mining it, or, they'd run out of mine. They couldn't keep digging or top would come down, so they had to do it just enough to get what they needed. But we did take billions and billions of dollars of silver out of there, but there is still plenty left and all kinds of other stuff that they didn't harvest, like gypsum, fluorite, stuff like that, all still down in there that they were harvesting back then for money.
When was the official end of operations for the mining?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I'm not sure I'm right to tell you that one. I know it was early 1900s, probably 1930s or 40s, somewhere around in there. But nothing has been changed down there since, except for we gave you some light so you can see, and that's about it. It's all been kept original.
The reason why this town came alive was because of silver. People heard that there was silver, and there was a lot of it, and that drew a lot of people. So at the time, it was about just 100 miners. In 7 years, it bloomed to 20,000 people. The majority of the people who lived here lived in tents. That's why you only have when the price of silver dropped, and it wasn't because of water, it wasn't because of anything except for the price of silver dropped, and the farther you dig in deep, the more it costs to pull that silver out. So it just became not cost effective to go after the silver. So, and at that point, they thought the town was going to die, but it never did. That's why we're called the town too tough to die.
One more gunfight in town today, folks. Our 3:30 shootout. That is coming up here in the Oriental Saloon. Grab a beer,
Tombstone has a reputation about the Cowboys and the Outlaws and gunfights. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Now, at the time, if you were called a cowboy, that was an insult. That meant you were a scum, you were dirty, you were bad. Okay, so right now when you say cowboy, thinks of it as a glorified name, but back then it was an insult. Now the Cowboys that were here, what they did, they had a business here from Mike Clanton. He owned a saloon, so he was one of the heads of what we at the time called the Cowboys. But they loved the town. Now they would party here because they had their business to run, which was go to Mexico, steal cattle, steal horses, bring it back into the U.S., and then they would sell them. And of course, they can get away with it because they crossed the border. So that was their main part of business. There was also a lot of stagecoaches, and everybody. That was in a sense an outlaw here, that they had businesses here. They didn't go after the stagecoaches because that was their business coming into town. Money would come in, people would come in, so they didn't want to disrupt that. So one of the big reasons that the famous gunfight happened was there was a robbery of a stagecoach, and at the time Ike Clanton knew who did it, but did not want to be called a snitch. So he had worked with Wyatt Earp and said, hey, I know who did it, but you can't tell anybody who did it. And if you arrest them, I want the reward money. Well, the people who actually robbed it were shot and killed in another robbery. So there was no reward money, and Ike was not happy with that. So he was upset with that. So that was just another part of the fractions that started to happen here. So as far as some of the why were there a lot of gunfights? Because there was first money, women, and alcohol and gambling, and you put all those together, and you would get arguments. Now they would come out here and settle in the street. Matter of fact, the deadliest intersection here in Tombstone is 5th and Allen Street, one more block in here. Because there was 4 saloons on there was a saloon on every corner. And the deadliest wasn't because of cars, it was because they were shot and killed because of all the arguments and the gunfights. So that was part of the history that you get to learn here. Yeah.
So the Birdcage Theater was built in 1881, and after the fire that happened here in Tombstone in 1881, it was one of 2 remaining theaters, but it became quickly the most popular spot and became known as the first-class establishment here in Tombstone, where all the big names would go to party, gamble, and have other extra activities.
In 1882, it was written as the most roughest and wickedest night spot between Basin Street and the Barbary Coast was the Birdcage Theater in the New York Times.
There's one of those famous spots you'll hear about Tombstone. As one of those saloons was the spot to be, especially if you were Wyatt Earp back in the day. Back in the 1880s, it was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it was part theater, part gambling hall, and part brothel. So you can see why some of the cowboys who were here might have enjoyed the company of being here. It was definitely the wildest spot in town, that's for sure. The walls still have bullet holes. There's over 140 of them, according to sources, of those bullet holes still here. So yeah, a pretty wild place. So I was just told that a really interesting fact about the Birdcage Theater is that there was a poker game that ran consistently for 8 years. And some of the biggest names, such as Wyatt Earp, were said to have taken partake in that game. Down here in the basement of the Birdcage Theater, where the private gambling rooms are, and the cribs were, where the working girls would meet their clients, it's said that Wyatt Earp first met Josephine and Marcus right here, performing upstairs. While the high-stakes poker games and late-night business went down, below these walls saw just about everything Tombstone tried to keep quiet. So you see these rooms here where the working girls would have been working. And yeah, I mean, you could probably figure out what kind of business happened down here. Here we have, made out what probably one of the bedrooms would have looked like. And here we got a picture of Wyatt and his lover. So apparently Wyatt Earp was still married when he met her, and she was still technically married or in a relationship with the sheriff, which was one of Wyatt's, or Johnny, was one of Wyatt Earp's rivals. So there's definitely some bad blood there, and yeah, those two definitely have a history here. And here would have been where the poker game's gone on. The one that went on for 8 years happened down here. And they can still get their drink on while they're gambling. So that was the Birdcage Theater. Definitely, if you're on your trip in Tombstone, you need to check it out. Incredibly important history spot for the town. Too tough to die. And hopefully you guys got some insight there. So just behind me is the Wyatt Earp house, where Wyatt Earp lived with his common law wife. What's interesting is now it's an Airbnb. So if you're staying in Tombstone, you can definitely stay at the house of Wyatt Earp. How cool is that? So another really awesome thing that you're going to see when you come here to Tombstone is as you walk along these streets, you'll see markers of historical events. For example, like people who were shot here, people who died right at this spot, or, you know, like back there, the Birdcage Theater.
Big Nose Kate Saloon, Tombstone, Arizona. It's the original location to the Grand Hotel, built in 1879. It did burn down in 1882, unfortunately, where we lost the top floor of the building where the rooms were located. After that, it became a small multiplex for small businesses that revolved in and out of it. And it wasn't until the early 1970s that Big Nose Kate Saloon was officially born.
Alright, so this room is about 145 years old, from 1880. It was the swamper who was the custodian to the Grand Hotel that used to be upstairs. He dug in a well that was already there for the Grand Hotel as a head start, and he took advantage of it. He was able to start digging, and he was able to sneak into the silver mines from there and start stealing silver. But they say because he was down there, he was actually caught by the miners and was shot on sight for trespassing and stealing. So that's where the legend came from, that he still haunts the place and he's still looking for his silver.
Well, is he ever going to come find it?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? They say he's still around here somewhere, but
All right, I'll
silver.
make sure to stay out of his way.
I gotcha.
All right. So behind me we have the home of Alan English. He was originally a miner, but down the road became a lawyer. Now what was interesting about him is he loved alcohol. He had a nice taste for that stuff. And he was known to take recesses during, court sessions so he could nurse his hangovers and get his drunk on. Interesting. I don't know if I would want him as my lawyer, but apparently he was very, very talented. One convenient thing for Alan English is when he was practicing law and needed his frequent breaks, he lived right here, across the street from his place of work, the Tombstone Courthouse. Behind me is the Tombstone Courthouse. Tombstone was originally the county seat of Cochise County, and it wasn't until 1929 where they voted to move it to Bisbee, Arizona, where it currently still is. So let's go check out the courthouse. So the building of this courthouse cost around $45,000, which back then was a massive feat for a mining town such as Tombstone. So the courthouse is designed in Victorian territorial style, and it's one of the best preserved examples of early Arizona governmental buildings and how the designs look like. So right now I'm standing in the actual courtroom where a lot of the famous court cases would have taken place. But here's a fun fact for you. If you so choose to, you can actually still get married here in Tombstone, Arizona, in this old-fashioned courtroom. So let's walk the path to the gallows, which definitely saw their fair share of justice. But did you know that the most infamous hanging here wasn't even official? So behind me you have the gallows here in Tombstone. But there's an interesting fact. The most famous hanging in Tombstone didn't actually happen here legally. See, there was a robbery in Bisbee that left 5 people dead. And 5 of those members who did the robbery were tried and executed here. However, the leader, John Heath, escaped the noose. The people of Tombstone were so upset and angry about that they found John and lynched him up on a telephone post. And he got his justice, just not legally. In total, there have been 7 executions here at the courthouse. Obviously what we're seeing today is a reconstruction, but here we can see the 5 men who were executed from the Bisbee robbery. And then 2 men here, William and Thomas, who were executed on the 16th of November. And as we can see here, the gallows is a reconstruction. The original was burned in 1912. And yeah, if you're taking a look at it, that thing is kind of massive. I definitely would not want to be standing up there. So that brings us to the end of our video here in Tombstone, Arizona. You heard it from some of the experts themselves, some of the stories and the history here. And Tombstone is definitely one of those places you need to check out if you're into Wild West history. So thanks for sticking around for another episode from Walking for History. Hopefully we learned something together, and if you did, make sure to subscribe for the next one. Until then, I'll see you there.